Hello and welcome back to another episode of From Prison to the Streets. I'm Eric. I did 11 years in prison, and I talk about prison stuff. Today I'm talking about when I moved back down to my childhood home, what I came home to, and what I'm doing with that now. It's been kind of a big project this year. My house, the shop, stuff like that. So I want to share a little bit of that with you guys. Be sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and if you like the video, I really appreciate that feedback. So I'm going to tell you a bit of a story here. I'm known for telling my stories or sharing my stories. This isn't particularly exciting. I think that you guys will find it interesting. But I'm going to take us all the way back to 1994 when my family first moved here from California. We bought a cheap house, very small, just basically in a open field is what it looked like. It was an open lot, but it kind of looked like a house sitting in the middle of a field. Small town, about 120 people. And after a while, I think it was 96 or 97, my dad purchased a building. It was basically a little garage, and he turned it into a shop. And we remodeled the house together. We put an addition on it. It's almost like we rebuilt or built half the house. And we all did it together. Me, my sisters, my dad, my mom. It was kind of a family thing. We put a lot of time and effort into this house. And I have so many memories from my childhood of working here. This is actually my old bedroom from when I was a kid. I have a lot of memories in this house, a lot of fond memories, and some that are not so good, but a lot of fond memories. And it's the same thing with the shop. You know, I grew up working in the shop. I grew up working on trucks. My dad was a truck driver, but he was also a mechanic. And we had our own shop where we specialized in heavy equipment. It was called E&D Truck and Tractor. And we worked on pretty much everything. And I learned a lot working with my dad growing up in that shop and going over there every day with him. Sometimes it was not so fun, and sometimes it was really fun, but it was always informative, and it was always a learning experience. My dad was one of the most knowledgeable people you could run into when it came to mechanical stuff. He was born in 41, and he started working on cars when he was a teenager, and he really had a knack for it. My dad always told me when I got old enough that the shop would be mine when he was gone, and when I was old enough to run the shop. And he always told me when I was growing up that the shop was half mine. That's what E&D stood for in E&D Truck and Tractor. It was Eric and Dad. And, you know, we were going to run the business together. We were going to build hot rods together. It's always what we talked about doing. It was our dream. Instead, we ended up working on heavy equipment and tractors and cars, and we ended up doing routine maintenance. And I went to prison. You know, I never got that chance to build cars with my dad and build hot rods with my dad. I never really got the opportunity to run the business and turn it into what we had dreamed of turning it into. While I was locked up, my father passed away, and my mom took control of the shop, and it closed down shortly thereafter. She ended up losing all of my tools. Some of them were stolen, some of them were sold. She sold the semi-truck. We had a old Kenworth. And she sold the trailers and everything. Basically sold the trucking business. My dad had his own trucking company and his own shop. A couple of years after my father passed away, my mom was really struggling. She wanted to move out of Kincaid. She didn't like the people here. She felt like she was being harassed and taken advantage of, and she wanted to get out of that. But she couldn't really afford to move because she owed a whole bunch of money and back taxes, and she couldn't continue to pay the taxes on the house, and she couldn't sell it. So it kind of left her in in a weird spot. On the one hand, she couldn't really move because she still had to pay taxes on the house and she was afraid of losing it, and she couldn't sell it. On the other hand, she didn't want to stay in Kincaid. My mother and I arrived at an agreement. One night we were talking on the phone, and she was telling me about how she wanted to move, but she had to take care of the house and she didn't want to lose the house and all this other stuff. So I said, hey, if you don't want to lose the house and you want to move, but you're worried about the taxes, if you sign the house over to me, I'll pay the taxes on the house. I'll take care of it. It'll stay in the family. Everybody's happy. She liked that idea. We went with it. She ended up moving. I took care of the taxes on the house and the shop, and she signed all that stuff over to me. And I ended up paying a bunch of back taxes that were owed on the house. And she was able to take the money that she saved up and move to Marion, Kansas. I want to say that was around 2011 or 2012. And I got out in 2018. And I ended up paying the taxes every year for the house and the shop. I didn't really have too much trouble with it. My aunt gave me a little bit of money, and, well, she had left me money when she passed away. She also passed away while I was locked up. And I hustled a lot. I made a lot of jewelry. I did calligraphy. I made greeting cards. I want to say a good portion of my money came from jewelry, though. I made kind of expensive stuff, pretty nice stuff. And, I was able to find a way to pay for the house. And I had help, too. My buddy Robert helped me out here and there. And the girl I was with at the time, she helped me out. So, I was able to make it happen. That's the bottom line. And that's kind of what you have to do. You always have to find a way to make things happen. Well, I got out in 2018, and the house wasn't really livable. I came down here and kind of scoped it out. There was a big leak in the roof. There were electrical issues. There was plumbing issues. And by issues, I mean there wasn't any. So I couldn't really move straight in. It wasn't until I was homeless for a while and then living with Brandy that, I was able to come down here and really get some work done. I was working on the house when I was living with my mom in Marion, even before I moved back down here. I had a good job and I was saving up money, and then I would come down here on the weekends. I had 3-day weekends usually, and I would work on the house. I worked on the yard. I worked on the interior of the house. I did what I could. And the plan was I was going to save up money here and there and put that into the house and then move in. But I lost my job and I ended up homeless. And that was a big obstacle, as far as getting the house done. But when I did come back down here and move in, like I said, it wasn't really livable. Big leak in the roof. No running water. Not really electricity. The electrical was pretty messed up. Like I couldn't run a heater or anything else. And it gets pretty cold in Kansas in the wintertime. And the shop had a lot of issues. The roof was falling in. There was a big leak in the roof and there was some trash in there. And I ended up putting some trash in there too because the house wasn't livable and I couldn't afford to have my trash picked up. So I would fill up a trailer with trash periodically and go out to the dump. It was pretty rough. But the biggest thing that struck me about coming back down here was the sadness that I felt when I saw the house. This was a house that I helped build, with my father and my mother and my sisters, and it meant a lot to me. For years, I'd put money into the taxes and stuff on the house and the shop that I grew up working in, and that's where I learned how to work on cars and trucks, spending time with my dad. And when I saw how empty everything was, it made my heart real heavy. Because when I was here, my dad was here, my mom was here, the house was home, the shop was home. You know, we used to laugh together, we used to eat together, we used to have a good time. We had a lot of bad days, but we had a lot of damn good days too. And all of it was just gone. And it was at that point that the absence of my father just really hit me. Since I've been back down here with the help of Brandy and my brother and Robert and a few other people, I've put the house back together little by little. The first thing was the electrical. You know, I got the electrical working good enough that I could power the RV that I was staying in. It was parked right next to the house. The RV was a little bit more comfortable than the house at the time. But after the electrical, you know, then it was plumbing. And before long, I was able to live in here semi-comfortably. But the shop was still in bad shape, and I didn't have the funds to fix it. Even when I was working, I had enough money to cover my car payment. That was about it. I made usually anywhere from $240 a week to, you know, $350 on a really good week, maybe $400. And that was doing construction, really hard work. You work long days, you leave before the sun comes up, and you come home when the sun's setting. And that's pretty much how it goes. And you come home and you're so beat up and worn out, a lot of times you don't even want to eat dinner. You just want to go to bed. I didn't have the funds and I didn't have the energy to really work on the house. However, starting my own company and trying to work for myself has allowed me to have a little bit more time to work on things and a little bit less money to work on things. So that's a challenge. But over the summer, when everything was happening with my mom, I had finally saved up the money and the materials to start putting the roof on my house. So that's what I did. I started putting the roof on my house. Then I needed to convert my old studio into a bedroom and turn this room into a studio. I started getting into this room and I discovered that carpenter ants had basically eaten all the framing in the walls. I don't even know how this part of the house was standing. And so I had to frame this whole part of the house. And that was a job. The problem was I didn't have the materials for the roof and the reframing on this part of the house. That's problematic because this had to be done. The house would have, you know, this part of the house was about to fall in because carpenter ants had eaten all the framing. So the materials that I was going to use for the roof went to repairing this room, or reframing this room, I should say. So I had to come up with a way to get the materials for my roof. So I looked at the shop. The roof was falling in on the shop. However, the trusses were in good shape. The sheeting was trash. The rest of the roof was bad, but some of the wood in the trusses was good. Some of the wood in the trusses was bad, but some of it was good. So I decided to start tearing down my dad's old shop. It needed to be done anyway. It was falling in. It was a safety issue. You know, some kid could go in there and the roof could fall in on them or something like that, and I wouldn't want something like that to happen. So I started tearing down the shop. And I believe I have the materials to do the roof now. But the takeaway here is, you know, the effects of incarceration might be a little bit broader in scope than you first think. You know, I thought to myself, well, I have a house, I have a place to go when I get out. But the reality of it was the house that I thought I was going to was run down and abandoned. For 7 years, at least, it was abandoned. And everything that I remembered about this house, the good memories, this house being filled with family, and this house being home, that was gone. All those memories I had with my dad in the shop, when I thought of those in contrast to what I saw of the shop, it was just heartbreaking, man. Going to prison can really wreck a good thing. If I had stayed on the right track, if I had stayed in the shop and kept working with my dad, I'd probably be running a pretty successful business right now. Now, I can sit around and be depressed about that and beat myself up over it, but that doesn't really get me anywhere, right? Instead, yeah, I'm tearing down the shop, but I'm rebuilding. I'm rebuilding my house. I'm going to rebuild the shop, and I'm going to reopen it. I have a vision and a plan and an idea and a hope, and I can make all that come to fruition. I can make that happen. It's on me if it doesn't happen. It's not on anybody else. I've been sicker than a dog, but every good day that I have, I'm trying to spend it rebuilding. And that's the attitude that it takes. It's all about your attitude. You can do anything if you have the right mindset. You can accomplish your goals. I just wanted to share those thoughts with you guys, and I did take some video of me tearing down the shop with my Bronco, of all things. I took the video over the span of several months because I started tearing down the shop, and then I started getting really sick with this sinus infection and ended up being stuck in bed for months and ended up in the hospital. As you guys know, I've told you about it. So in some parts of the video, the grass is green, and in other parts of the video, everything's dead. But I just wanted to share that with you guys. That's what I got going on. I'm trying to rebuild my life. I know a lot of you guys come for the stories, but this is an ongoing story. Prison isn't something that affects you for a short time period and then it's all good. Prison is something that could potentially change your life and have permanent effects on your life. But this is my story, and it's an ongoing story. It's a constant struggle. There's constantly something going wrong. There's constantly a challenge. There's constantly a obstacle that I have to overcome. And I can either get a case of the fuck it's and say, fuck this, I'm going to do something to get me sent back to prison. Or I can say, you know what? It's a start. I have my own property. I can build something on it. I have a house. I can make it better. And that's what I'm doing. You just have to take it all in stride and keep going and do the best you can. And that's what I'm doing. I'm not rich. I'm not super successful, but I try. And I got a beautiful family that loves me. And for real, that's all I really need. Anyway, I'm going to do my outro here. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoy these shots of me tearing down the shop. And I do talk a little bit in one shot. Before I go, if you want to support the channel, there's a link to my PayPal in the description. I also have a Patreon page. I have merch. All the links are in the description. I don't have any Patreons. So if you want to be my first Patreon, I'm just saying there's a link down in the thing. So thank you. I'm Eric. This has been another episode of From Prison to the Streets. I will see you all later. Enjoy the end of the video. This is me and my dad's old shop. It sits right on Commercial Street here in Kincaid.
And, you know, there used to be a building here as well. It was torn down while I was locked up. My mom and her boyfriend tore it down. But this was the shop. This is where I learned how to work on cars and semi-trucks and stuff like that. And it's fallen in. The roof started caving in a while back, and I need that wood. I need the wood from the trusses that you see up there. It's still, some of it's still decent. So I can repurpose those boards from the trusses for my roof. And I can probably tear down this cinder block and use it for something, because this was falling in. I mean, some kid could come over here and get hurt or something. I don't want that to happen. So I'm gonna tear this down, repurpose a cinder block and trusses, and we'll go from there. It's sad to see this torn down, because this is where I spent my childhood. Damn near every day I was over here working on stuff with my dad. And this is all that's left. This is what happens when you get locked up for a decade plus, you know? This was the shop. And then over here, you can see I've already torn some of it down. And this is what I have to work with to tear it down. I got a little tiny trailer and my Bronco. This little camper, I guess you'd call it. That's what it was originally. This was the shop office at one time, and this is where I was kind of homeschooled on some days. A lot of days, my mom was comatose with Oxycontin because she had a bad drug addiction. So a lot of days I would just do my schoolwork by myself, and then I would go, you know, ride my bicycle around these deserted streets of Kincaid. But, you know, you do what you do. You always try to make the best of whatever situation you find yourself in. So now I guess I'm going to try to tear this down. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to go about it. I do know there's a lot of trash in here, and I actually have a trash trailer. So I think I'm going to go pick up the trash trailer and throw some of this trash in it. That way I can actually back into the building, and we'll just go from there. Well, I'm all hooked up. I'm hooked up to a whole bunch of trusses. I filled up our trash trailer here, and by all means I should probably unhook the trash trailer and pull straight off the back of the Bronco, but sometimes, just for shits and giggles, you have to do things the wrong way just so you can have some fun with your truck.
Friday